There's a certain kind of man who walks through life differently, not because he chooses to, but because life has shown him the truth. When the lights dim and the noise fades, most people vanish. A man with no friends understands this reality early. He doesn't live in bitterness, but in awareness. He sees through the smiles, the handshakes, the promises that carry no weight. And while others drown in the need for validation, he learns to breathe in silence. Being alone is not a curse. It's a classroom. Every lesson is written in solitude. Every breakthrough carved in the hours where nobody checks on you, nobody calls, nobody applauds. That's where resilience is built. That's where vision sharpens. So many are terrified of walking without a crowd. They fear the quiet because the quiet forces them to confront themselves. But the man with no friends knows that greatness isn't found in the comfort of company. It's discovered in the wilderness of isolation. He doesn't chase acceptance. He builds strength. He doesn't beg for loyalty. He embodies it. And when the time comes, his silence speaks louder than their noise. Self-reliance is one of the hardest lessons a man can learn, yet it is the very foundation of becoming unbreakable. When you live as a man with no friends, you are forced to face the reality that nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is going to carry your burdens. Nobody will consistently show up for you, and nobody will fight your battles the way you must fight them yourself. In that space, you either collapse under the weight of isolation or you rise up and build a backbone that no storm can bend. Self-reliance is the art of building strength within yourself when the world around you is silent. It means trusting your judgment when no one else validates it, believing in your vision when no one else sees it, and pushing yourself forward when no one else offers encouragement. People often confuse self-reliance with arrogance. But it's not about shutting out the world. It's about no longer depending on it. A man who relies only on the crowd will crumble when the crowd disappears. But a man who stands on his own feet, who sharpens his skills, and who learns to trust his instincts will always remain standing no matter who walks away. That is the gift of solitude. It forces you to discover just how capable you truly are. When you have no one to call, no one to lean on, you begin to understand that every step you take must be fueled by your own willpower. And in time, that builds a mental toughness most people will never experience. While others are paralyzed by fear of judgment, you move freely because you are not looking for anyone's approval. While others hesitate, waiting for someone to hold their hand, you act with decisiveness because you know hesitation is a luxury the self-reliant cannot afford. Self-reliance also demands discipline. Without discipline, isolation becomes destructive. With discipline, it becomes a weapon. You wake yourself up when there is no one to call your name. You're supposed to be a burden to a degree. You hold yourself accountable when there is no one to check on you. You build your routines, your habits, your progress brick by brick because there is no safety net to catch you if you fall. And strangely, this pressure doesn't break you. It forges you. The man with no friends doesn't drift aimlessly. He becomes the architect of his own destiny, bricklayer of his own empire, protector of his own soul. The truth is, most people never truly experience self-reliance. They live attached to others, addicted to validation, terrified of rejection. They outsource their strength depending on crowds' opinions and approval to keep them moving. But once you've walked through the fire of loneliness, you realize something powerful. The only approval that truly matters is your own. The only voice that truly guides you is your own. And the only person who is guaranteed to stand with you until the end is the man you see in the mirror. That's why self-reliance is not just survival. It is freedom. When you no longer need anyone to carry you, you cannot be manipulated. When you no longer crave constant companionship, you cannot be controlled. When you no longer fear standing alone, you can finally walk your path without compromise. And in that freedom lies a strength that no betrayal, no abandonment, no disappointment can ever take away. Loneliness is often treated as a weakness, something to escape from, something to numb with distractions, crowds, or shallow relationships. But for a man who learns how to embrace it, loneliness becomes a forge. It becomes a place where the noise of the world fades and the sharpness of truth begins to cut through. In solitude, you see yourself for who you are, without the filters of approval, without the shadows of other people's opinions. It strips you down to your raw essence, and that's where real strength is built. Most men fear loneliness because it forces them to confront the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. The silence exposes your insecurities, your doubts, your fears, and your flaws. It shows you the gaps in your discipline and the cracks in your mindset. But instead of running from that, the man who walks alone learns to face it head on. He learns to study himself, to understand his weaknesses, and then to work on them without excuse. While others waste their solitude trying to escape reality, he uses it to sharpen his character and build an inner foundation that cannot be shaken. The strength of loneliness comes from its clarity. When you are constantly surrounded by people, your vision is blurred by their expectations, their opinions, their desires. But when you are alone, your thoughts have space to breathe. Your ideas find structure. Your purpose starts to reveal itself without interruption. Loneliness becomes a filter that removes the unnecessary and leaves only what is essential. That's why many of the greatest ideas, the strongest plans, and the deepest transformations happen in moments of isolation. A man who can sit alone and embrace that silence has an advantage most people will never touch, because he has learned to listen to the voice within. And with that clarity comes focus. In the company of others, it's easy to lose sight of your direction. You get pulled into distractions, drama, and meaningless noise. But in loneliness, you see the road ahead without obstruction. You can lock in on your goals with laser precision. You can work without needing applause, move without needing validation, and build without needing recognition. The absence of others forces you to channel all your energy into your craft, your growth, and your mission. That focus becomes your power, and over time it transforms you into someone unstoppable. Loneliness also teaches resilience. The first time you realize no one is coming to rescue you, it stings. The first time you face a setback with no one to lean on, it feels unbearable. But every time you survive those moments, every time you endure that weight, you grow stronger. You start to understand that you can endure more than you thought. You can take hits and still keep moving. You can fall and still rise again, not because someone picks you up, but because you refuse to stay down. That resilience is what separates men who only survive with company from men who thrive in silence. Eventually, what once felt like loneliness transforms into solitude, a chosen space of power rather than a forced state of emptiness. You begin to appreciate the quiet, because it is in the quiet that you are at your strongest. It is in the quiet that you plan, reflect, and refine. It is in the quiet that you step away from the illusions of the world and step deeper into your truth. The man who learns to embrace his solitude no longer fears being alone, because he knows that loneliness was never weakness. It was training. It was the gym for his spirit, the battleground for his mind, and the birthplace of his strength. Most people go through life believing they are surrounded by friends. They confuse acquaintances for loyalty, lauder for love, and convenience for commitment. But a man with no friends has learned through experience that friendship, as most people know, is often an illusion. It's supposed to be a burden to a degree. It looks real when the times are good, when your pockets are full, when your energy is high, and when you have something to give. But the moment the struggle comes, the masks fall off. People you once called brothers suddenly become strangers. People who once said, "I got you," vanish when you need them the most. The illusion of friendship is built on conditions. As long as you provide value, entertainment, or opportunity, people will stand next to you. But the second those conditions change, so does their loyalty. It's not that people are always malicious. It's that many are selfish, living for their own gain, their own comfort, their own needs. And when those needs no longer align with yours, their friendship dissolves. The man who has been abandoned learns this harsh truth, and though it hurts, it also frees him. Because once you see through the illusion, you stop expecting others to carry you, and you stop giving pieces of yourself to those who never truly valued you. This is why disappointment in people becomes one of the greatest teachers. It forces you to redefine what friendship really means. It makes you stop chasing crowds and start valuing quality over quantity. Instead of clinging to dozens of people who only show up when it benefits them, you learn to stand alone with pride. Instead of being blinded by flattery, you begin to study actions. Words are cheap. Consistency is priceless. When someone claims to be your friend, you watch how they move when you're struggling, not when you're shining. Because in struggle, the illusion breaks. The man with no friends also realizes how dangerous blind trust can be. The wrong company can sabotage your growth more than loneliness ever could. Fake friends drain your energy, poison your vision, and distract you from your purpose. They laugh with you in public but envy you in silence. They clap when you win small but resent you when you aim for something greater. Keeping people like that around is far more dangerous than walking alone. Better an empty circle than a circle filled with snakes. This understanding transforms how you deal with people. You no longer measure friendships by how many people show up to the party, but by how many will show up to the fight. You no longer confuse social media likes with real support. You stop believing that everyone smiling in your face is truly on your side. This shift can feel lonely at first, but it sharpens your perception. It teaches you to see people for who they really are, not who they pretend to be. And once you embrace that truth, you gain power. The illusion of friendship no longer controls you. You don't waste energy chasing validation from people who would abandon you tomorrow. You don't sacrifice your values to fit into groups that would never bleed for you. Instead, you invest in yourself, you build your foundation, and you walk your path with clarity. If real friendship appears along the way, you'll recognize it by its actions. But until then, you remain content and unshaken in knowledge that false friends can no longer fool you. That's the gift of being a man with no friends. You see through the illusion, and in doing so, you protect your soul from betrayal. You stop mistaking shadows for substance, and you become comfortable with the idea that solitude is safer than standing in a crowd of pretenders. Silence is one of the most underrated powers a man can possess. In a world filled with constant noise or endless chatter and opinions flying from every direction, silence becomes a weapon. It's in silence that you discover who you really are, because there's no distraction to hide behind. A man with no friends learns quickly that the most important conversations are not the ones you have with others. They're the ones you have with yourself. Silence becomes the space where your inner voice grows louder, where your instincts sharpen, and where your spirit begins to guide you with clarity that outside noise can never provide. When you live without a circle of friends to constantly lean on, silence stops being something you fear and becomes something you value. Most people cannot sit still without a phone, without music, without company, because the silence confronts them with their own thoughts. But the man who embraces solitude learns to sit in that stillness, to face his doubts, his insecurities, his ambitions, and his truths. Instead of running from himself, he uses silence to understand himself. That self-awareness is priceless because it creates direction. You cannot build a strong future if you are constantly drowning in other people's noise. Silence also builds discipline. When no one is around to fill your time with conversation, gossip, or distraction, you learn to use those quiet hours productively. In silence, you can read, plan, create, and execute. You can focus entirely on the work that matters, undisturbed by the trivialities that consume the lives of those who are never alone. That discipline compounds on over time, and while others waste their days in meaningless chatter, you move steadily closer to your vision. The silence becomes your training ground, your workshop, your sanctuary. Another gift of silence is control. A man who knows when to stay silent is dangerous because he cannot be easily read. Most people reveal too much through their words, their emotions, their reactions. But silence allows you to observe, to study, to calculate. You learn more by listening than by speaking, and you gain an advantage by being the one who doesn't rush to reveal his hand. In conversations, silence makes others uncomfortable, and in that discomfort, they expose themselves. While they talk too much, you gather information. While they reveal their weaknesses, you preserve your strength. Silence is not weakness, it is strategy. Silence also protects your energy. Words are powerful, and every conversation requires energy. By learning when to remain silent, you conserve your strength for what truly matters. You stop wasting words on people who don't listen, on arguments that don't matter, and on crowds that won't remember. Instead, you speak only when necessary, and when you do, your words carry weight. People pay attention to the man who rarely speaks because when he does, it means something. Silence gives your voice power. In time, silence even becomes peace. Without constant noise, you start to notice things others overlook. The sound of your own breath, the rhythm of your thoughts, the presence of your spirit. The world may be chaotic, but in your silence, you find calm. That calm becomes a shield, allowing you to move through life with focus while others are consumed by distractions. A man with no friends doesn't fill the void with endless noise. He fills it with silence, and from that silence, he draws wisdom, strength, and control. It is in the quiet that he grows. It is in the quiet that he heals, and it is in the quiet that he finds himself. Energy is the most valuable currency a man has. Unlike money, once it's spent, you can't always get it back the same way. Every conversation, every interaction, every relationship costs energy. And when you are a man with no friends, you begin to see clearly just how many people waste that currency. You learn to protect it like a treasure, because giving it to the wrong people leaves you drained, distracted, and weakened. Selective energy is about understanding that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone should be allowed into your space, and not everyone has earned the right to consume your time. Most people scatter their energy carelessly. They give it to gossip, to meaningless arguments, to shallow connections, to people to a degree, to people who take but never give. Then they wonder why they feel empty, why they have no strength left to build their dreams, why their motivation fades so quickly. A man who learns selective energy doesn't fall into that trap. He chooses carefully where his time goes, because he knows his energy is finite. If he spends it on things that don't grow him, he robs himself of the power to reach his purpose. Selective energy also requires discernment. Not everyone who smiles at you is on your side. Not everyone who asks for your time has good intentions. Some people only want to use you to feed off your spirit, to keep you stuck at their level. They will drain your energy with constant complaints, with envy, with negativity, with their endless need for validation. If you are not careful, you'll find yourself carrying their weight while they contribute nothing to your growth. The man with no friends sees this clearly because solitude has taught him the difference between genuine support and disguised parasitism. He doesn't let everyone into his circle because his circle is sacred. To live with selective energy, you must develop the strength to say no. No to the invitations that distract you. No to the conversations that go nowhere. No to the relationships that pull you backwards. Every time you say no, you protect your power. Every time you refuse to waste energy, you keep it for the things that matter, your goals, your vision, your discipline. And over time, this habit separates you from the masses. While they exhaust themselves chasing approval and pleasing everyone, you grow stronger by channeling your energy into the life you're building. Selective energy also means knowing when to withdraw. Not every battle deserves your fight. Not every insult deserves of your response. Not every challenge deserves your attention. Sometimes silence and distance are the most powerful moves you can make. By walking away from what drains you, you preserve your fuel for what elevates you. This discipline transforms you into a man who moves with intention, not reaction. You stop being controlled by the world and start controlling how you engage with it. Over time, you realize that protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's survival. You cannot pour into your vision if you are constantly emptied by distractions. You cannot give your best self to your mission if you are drained by people who only take. The man who walks alone understands this better than anyone. He doesn't waste time trying to please everyone. He doesn't waste strength on meaningless connections. He invests his energy like a weapon, sharp, precise, and only in places where it will grow. Selective energy turns solitude into a source of power. By guarding what you give, you ensure that every ounce of your strength builds you into something greater. You become unshakable, untouchable, and unstoppable because your energy is no longer scattered. It is focused, and focused energy can move mountains. Isolation is often misunderstood. To most people, it feels like punishment, a state to be avoided at all costs. But for the man who learns to use it, isolation becomes one of the most fertile grounds for growth. It's in isolation that distractions are stripped away, that the noise of the world fades, and that you are left face to face with your potential. growth in isolation is not accidental.
Yeah.
It's intentional. It's the decision to take the season of being alone and turn it into a workshop where you build, sharpen, and transform yourself. When you are surrounded by people, your identity is constantly being influenced. Their voices, their habits, their opinions, all of it seeps into you. But when you're alone, you get to hear your own thoughts clearly. That's when you begin to discover who you are without the masks, without the pressure to perform for others. You learn what you truly value, what you really want, and what path feels authentic to you. That self-awareness is the foundation of growth, and it rarely comes when you're lost in the crowd. Isolation also teaches patience. Growth doesn't happen overnight. When you're alone, you realize how much discipline it takes to build yourself brick by brick. There is no audience clapping for you, no friends hyping you up, no recognition to keep you motivated. All you have is the grind, the repetition, the daily choice to get better. That process is slow, but it's in the slowness that your character is forged. It's supposed to be a burden to a degree. You learn to trust the work even when no one is watching. You learn to endure the weight without losing faith. That kind of patience makes you unbreakable because you're no longer addicted to instant results. You're invested in long-term transformation. Growth in isolation also comes from the ability to focus deeply with no distractions pulling you in different directions. You can dedicate your full energy to your craft, your discipline, your purpose. It's in these hours alone that skills are sharpened, that knowledge is absorbed, and that plans are built. History shows us that some of the greatest leaders, thinkers, and creators went through seasons of isolation before they stepped into their greatness. They withdrew from the crowd to prepare for the mission, and when they returned, they were equipped with vision and strength that set them apart. Another form of growth in isolation is emotional strength. When you spend time alone, you face the emotions that most people run from: fear, doubt, sadness, insecurity. At first, it feels heavy, but over time, you develop resilience. You learn how to manage your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You stop needing constant comfort from others, and you start becoming your own source of stability. That emotional independence becomes a shield against betrayal, disappointment, and loss. Because once you face your darkest moments alone, nothing anyone does can shake you the same way again. And perhaps the greatest growth in isolation is spiritual. In the quiet, when the world is no longer demanding your attention, you connect to something higher. Whether you call it faith, purpose, or destiny, you begin to feel that your life has meaning beyond the noise. You understand that being alone is not abandonment. It is preparation. It's a season designed to shape you into the man you're supposed to become. By the time you emerge from isolation, you are not the same. You're sharper, stronger, and more focused. You've shed the weight of needing constant companionship, and you've built yourself into someone who can walk forward with confidence. Whether or not anyone walks beside you, that is the gift of isolation. It doesn't just leave you with survival. It leaves you with transformation. Becoming unshakable is the ultimate transformation of a man who has walked through loneliness, betrayal, and isolation. It is not something that happens overnight. It is the product of struggle, silence, and self-reliance. When you no longer fear being alone, when you no longer crumble under the weight of abandonment, you become a man who cannot be broken by circumstances. The storms that destroy others only strengthen you. The setbacks that paralyze others only fuel your persistence. Unshakable is not a posture. It is a state of being built from within. The reason most people are fragile is because their strength depends on external factors. They need constant support, validation, and company. When life shakes those foundations, they collapse. But a man who has trained himself to stand alone has already removed those dependencies. He doesn't need applause to keep working. He doesn't need company to feel valuable. He doesn't need reassurance to trust his vision. His foundation is internal, not external, and that makes him immovable. Becoming unshakable also comes from mastering adversity. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every silent night where no one checked in, it all becomes training. Each hardship is like weight added to the bar, and over time, the man who keeps lifting grows stronger. What once felt unbearable eventually feels light. That's why nothing can shake him anymore. Not rejection, not failure, not loneliness. He's already carried heavier loads, and he knows he can survive whatever comes next. To be unshakable, you must also master your emotions. Anger, fear, sadness, and doubt will always exist, but the unshakable man does not allow them to dictate his choices. He feels them, but he doesn't bow to them. He channels anger into discipline, fear into preparation, and pain into growth. Others may be tossed around by their feelings, but he remains steady because he has trained himself to respond with control instead of reaction. Emotional mastery is one of the pillars of becoming unshakable. Another key element is vision. A man without vision is easily shaken because he has no anchor. He drifts with the tides of life, pulled in every direction by other people's opinions and expectations. But a man with vision walks a straight path. He knows where he is going, and because of that, he cannot be swayed by temporary storms. His vision is the compass that keeps him grounded, no matter how loud the distractions become. That clarity allows him to keep moving forward even when the world doubts him. Resilience also defines the unshakable man. Life will test you over and over again. You will fall, you will fail, you will be betrayed, and you will lose. But resilience is the ability to rise again every time. The unshakable man does not pretend that pain doesn't exist. He simply refuses to let it defeat him. He uses every setback as fuel, every scar as proof of survival. And with each comeback, his foundation becomes even stronger. Finally, becoming unshakable means embodying peace in the midst of chaos. While others panic when things fall apart, the unshakable man remains calm. His calm is not ignorance, it is confidence. He has been through enough storms to know that panic changes nothing. He has endured enough trials to know that strength lies in patience and persistence. That calm presence makes him a force in any environment. To be unshakable is to live free from dependency, free from fear, free from the need for constant support. It is to walk with the knowledge that no matter who leaves, no matter what fails, no matter how heavy life gets, you will endure and you will rise. That is the power of the man who no longer fears walking alone.